Thank you so much for joining us on Perspectives with Asama Silva. A little bit different today as we keep it local. We're not going around the world. No globe-trotting today. Skyping people in from wherever it may be, but from right here in Holden, Wachusett High School. Evan is with us. Chris is with us as well. Both of them are mega geniuses, which is right up your alley, Asama. You're already heavily recruiting them, I'm sure, for WPI. You guys have been international science fair, competing. Killer robots, I'm hoping, comes up at some point in the conversation. But let's go to Asama and have her talk a little bit about what it is you two have been up to.
Well, full disclosure, I'm on the Wachusett School Committee. And every year what Wachusett does is they have something with Science Seminar, and they really showcase the students who have done a lot of their projects. And as you know, Hank, I get, impressing me is pretty difficult.
It is.
But every year that these students come, and they just blow me away. And one of our last meetings, I was so impressed. I said, this time I have to have them on my show. So thank you, Chris and Evan, for coming today. And we want to get started to find out, like both of you, first of all, what got you interested in science?
All right, Chris, go ahead.
Sure. I always had a love for nature, I would say. Going to the zoo initially, when I first saw an elephant, I was like, this is what I want to do. Going into biology. And then in about 8th grade, my teacher talked to me a lot about energy and renewable energy sources and how important they would be for society. And I wanted to pursue that. I wanted to see if I could in some way benefit or learn about how to benefit people in that way. And that, once I was given the opportunity to work on a science project in high school, that nature and energy kind of combined, and that's sort of the direction I went with my science.
Okay, so the two of them together. What was the name of the teacher in the 8th grade who inspired you to change?
It was.
I put you on the spot.
I'm
That's all right.
now.
But I love the fact that you had a teacher who was able to inspire you. I mean, I think that is great. But so how do energy and nature come together?
So what I found was when I was researching into different energy sources to stop global warming and other things like that, was biofuel, which is liquid fuel like diesel that is synthesized from the fats, the lipids made from plants, and in this case, algae. I grew algae and wanted to see if I could increase the lipid production of the algae in different growth conditions so that it could be used for making biofuel.
And what grade were you doing this in?
So I started this in sophomore year and continued into junior year.
Well, this is happening in Wachusett.
This is happening at
Nice
Wachusett.
job that you're doing.
Well, I'm an alumni,
No,
so
I understand.
I gotta,
yeah.
I gotta
Very
showcase
good.
that. What about you, Evan?
I'd probably say that I probably knew I wanted to be a scientist since the age of 4-ish. The earliest original piece of artwork we have in our house is one that I drew when I was in preschool, where they were like, "What do you want to be when you're grown up?" And I had myself in scrubs giving someone on a stretcher a carrot because I thought that that's just what made people better in medicine. And from there I just think that asking why just has been always a favorite pastime of mine. And I think once that I had the opportunity to begin working in the lab at UMass, once I got to Wachusett, that was probably the biggest stimulus probably of what I'm doing now.
Now, what is that program? Is it sort of an internship, or it's a way? How are you able to work in the lab at UMass?
Kind of. So Dr. Bill Therkoff is one of the mentors at Science Seminar, and he started working with me as a sophomore, and so I'd kind of go in every Tuesday night and catch him up on what I'd been doing at home with my project. And so it got to a point where he was like, "These are some pretty interesting data. Where are you collecting all of this?" And I was like, "My living room." And he was like, "Nah, not anymore." And so since then, I've just kind of been working at the Biotech 2 facility in Worcester.
What data were you collecting in your living room?
So I work with Drosophila melanogaster, or the common fruit fly. And so a lot of my work is on transgenerational inheritance, so specifically fertility patterns and how they vary from one generation to the next based on nutritional stimulus. And so a lot of the really basic data I could collect just at my house because I was just kind of raising flies. But then once I got into the more nuanced parts of it, the lab kind of helped out.
Do you feel like there's a lot of patience on the parents' level that is
Well,
required for this?
I got to tell you, yeah. I mean, especially when one is raising fruit flies in one's home.
Yes.
I think the parents are a part of this. Excuse my ignorance. So, how do you do that? Do you store them in the refrigerator?
Sort of. So basically, it helps to have like a temperature-controlled environment. Obviously, a lab is more conducive to that. But yeah, so to sedate them for like transferring vials, that was probably my mom's biggest concern. Was like as soon as they started getting out, she's like, "This can't happen." Yeah, I think that it's mostly just the kind of mastering transferring from vial to vial. Basically, it's just if you keep them in a secure spot that's not too cold or too hot, they'll live pretty securely.
So, I get mom's concern about. Okay, enough with the fruit flies. What's the secure environment? I mean, have you set up like a little lab at your home?
So basically, I only really collected data at my house for the first couple months or so of my project.
Okay, and then you were able to do what you meant.
Yeah, and then I was at the lab. But in my home, it was just like kind of the side of my dining room was like my little lab.
I just think that's brilliant. I mean, boy, that's fantastic.
But I mean, for people to understand, you started off your projects not knowing where it was going to head you to.
Yeah.
And so you started off as a science project just for a class, correct? Like just for, academic purposes, requirements for your class for science. Mm-hmm. And then you participated in the local science fair.
Yep.
And I'm assuming both of you won awards at the local science fair, went on to the regional, which is held at WPI, won there, then went on to states, which is held at MIT, and won there, and then went to international.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, listen, I mean, just that this is your science class at Wachusett is blowing me away. Granted for me it was a long time ago. I'm not sure I remember raising fruit flies and or dealing with algae to solve, global warming and make sure that, that mankind is going to be better. I don't maybe we were into that or somebody in the class was. I don't think I was. Why fruit flies? I mean, what is it that everybody is always studying fruit flies? What do they have to do? What similarity do they have to man?
That's a great question. That's one that I think gets asked a lot because people always wonder about, how can you connect an invertebrate that small to human progress? So I think the biggest connection is the genetic similarity. Specifically, 70% of heritable pathologies have homologs in the Drosophila genome. And then beyond that, what I was personally a lot more interested in were the mechanisms by which they maintain the integrity of their genome architecture. So in other words, how do they protect their DNA from being damaged? And the mechanisms by which they do that are almost identically conserved in humans. And so that's why I used
How do you feel about being related to a fruit fly?
I got to tell you, I listened.
You listened.
I heard the words. I am going to nod as if and I'm going to wait for the subtitles on the episode at home. I mean, that's fantastic. And I guess I am a little surprised. But we're always hearing about this, about the fruit flies as being something that people are studying. So what are you now doing with this project? And are you still studying the fruit flies at UMass?
Yeah, so I've been kind of working with the same continuous strain of research since late sophomore year, and then I've just kind of been extending it. And now I'm a senior, and I'm still working in the lab.
Boy, all right.
But Chris, you talked about elephants and environment and some biofuel. Could you give us a little bit of an update on what the algae that you were growing had anything to do with biofuel?
Oh, sure. So right now, the primary fuel source that we have is from fossil fuels like oil and natural gas. And the issue with those is when we combust them, it releases carbon dioxide and other gases into the atmosphere, which is highly pollutant and also is a greenhouse gas. So that actually causes global warming. It traps the heat from the sun. And biofuel essentially takes the fats, the lipids made from the algae, and they go through a process called transesterification, which converts it into a diesel that when you combust, it also releases carbon dioxide, but because it came from the living algae, that carbon dioxide is recent. So it takes the carbon dioxide out of the air and puts it right back in. There's no change in, unlike the ancient CO2 that you have in oil that you're releasing into the atmosphere.
Who else is working on this? Are we solving global warming at Wachusett High School? I mean, is somebody else working on this, I hope?
So it is a new industry, and a lot of people are getting into it. There was an ExxonMobil commercial that went out recently. They're starting to pursue algal biofuel. But I worked with a small company actually in California. That's where I purchased my algae from. I was amazed because it's such a new industry. You can actually call the company number and get the CEO and
Fantastic. So you've
talk
been
to
able
them.
to talk to him.
I was, yes.
I bet he was pretty impressed when you gave him a call.
Well, he was very open to me,
Yeah.
and I was very happy to talk to him. He was very passionate about this field, and was very happy to talk to me as a student, and discuss just my school science project.
Boy, I love that. I have to admit, I honestly thought that somehow we were going to tie the elephant
To something.
like the
Yeah.
elephant waste or something was going to be what the product was until we got to the algae. I was so this is great. How worried should we be about global warming?
So there's a lot of different effects, and there's a lot of debate over what those effects are, but the majority of scientists agree that global warming is happening and climate change is happening, and that it is caused largely by our heavy use of fossil fuels. And apart from actually affecting the environment and hindering ecosystems and causing different species to decline or go extinct, it's also in many ways affecting human health all across the world, what with an increase in droughts and a decrease in air quality, especially right now in India and China. There's more alerts about the poor air quality that's actually affecting the livelihood of the people there.
Seems undeniable that we have this more severe weather. How is what you're doing, and I assume what you're going to be doing in the future, going to be able to save us, to help us?
So the goal is to find a clean, sustainable, and efficient energy source. And while biofuel does meet those requirements, its waste products are non-pollutant, and in fact they can be used to create more fuel because the protein residue and the carbon dioxide that it gives off can be used to grow more algae. But also, it is efficient. You could grow the algae very quickly anywhere. The issue is it's not efficient enough to compete with fossil fuel companies. So it's not able to thrive economically, and that's why you can't go to the gas station and fill your car up with algae fuel. So I was, in my experiments, trying to see if I could lower the cost and increase the efficiency of the algal growth and lipid production by testing common methods and seeing if they really were the best ones to use, or if we could substitute them for cheaper and more efficient ones.
When you told the CEO what it was that you were doing, I mean, how interested was he actually in your experiment and what it is that you're doing?
So he had worked with a lot that I was doing, but he was intrigued that I was testing the two different variables against each other. And he said, he actually said, when you are comparing two independent variables and looking for the specific differences that they have on the algal growth and different procedures in the algae, it's like not looking for a needle in a haystack, but looking for a needle on a distant planet. So he was excited. I think that I was willing to go up against this and see how I could do. And I'm happy with what I was able to.
Wouldn't have been surprised if you had ended up on the payroll.
Right, I know. My question with both of you is going through all these science fairs and going through all those judges and those questions. So the question I have, if you can both answer it one at a time, is what was one question that really surprised you, that made you learn more, that made you think and say, do I need to change my project, or do I need to question my assumptions or my hypotheses? If each one of you can answer that.
So at the international fair, actually, one of my judges was a businessman from Texas, and he asked me a lot of questions about exactly how much more efficient would I be making the biofuel, or exactly how much more efficient is biofuel than regular gasoline. And I did not know those specifics, and that led me to actually look into knowing, how efficient is biofuel and the different procedures there. But I had focused more, I guess, on the biological component, but really, like he helped me to understand, the economic component is very important, because ideally biofuel would already be available, but
Right.
because it has to also compete
Yeah,
economically.
sometimes as engineers or scientists, we go for what's cool and don't forget about the dollar sign part of it. What about you, Evan?
I definitely agree with Chris that the question got a bit tougher at the international level. I think that at one point, a judge got pretty deep into like the various protein pathways that control egg production in Drosophila, and the various ways to implicate each ones and the effect that I was seeing. And so I think I just had to really kind of dig really deep into my knowledge of like the biochemistry associated with Drosophila. But yeah, no, there's definitely some questions that you get that just kind of.
Can you say half the words he said?
I'm going to say no. Awesome. Tell me, listen, I was an American history major. So the world of the science and the international is not my area. Tell me a little bit about this. I mean, set this up for us. So here at Wachusett, did you go through this when you were at
I went through this
Okay.
myself.
What is the science fair and how it goes and progresses?
So the greatest part about this program is, it's a public school, and I was an alumni. I went through Wachusett, and the greatest part is for each science class, if you're taking honors science, they require you to do a yearly science project. And they also, community members get together and they have what is called a science seminar, which meets once a week. And different doctors, professors, scientists volunteer their time throughout the year. For the full year, they mentor all these kids who join science seminar to help them come up with their assumptions, give them some advice, help them progress in their projects. Now, at the end of that year, our high school holds a science fair, and whoever wins from that goes on to the WPI Science Fair. And at the WPI Regional Science Fair, you have, from Worcester County, all the high schools who did have, again, their local winners come to the regional high school. And again, they go through all the judges, and things are assessed about your project and how you did. If you win at the regional, you go to the States. So I had gone to the States myself when I went to Wachusett. And at the States, you have about 400 students from all over the state that have done amazing, amazing work all year long, or sometimes multiple year projects, and they compete there. And then if you win there, you go on to the international. So this is a long process. It's a long, you have to go through steps in terms of writing, in terms of presentation, in terms of experiments. It takes a lot, I remember, for parents to be, patient, and some expenditure, because sometimes parents do have to put in some money.
And all while you're doing your regular school
All
work.
while you're doing your regular schoolwork.
Boy, that is really amazing. Chris, it seems clear that you've had some mentors. Evan, are there some mentors along the way for you so far?
Yeah, I definitely say that, like I said earlier, Dr. Bill Thurkoff at UMass is a pretty enormous one. Aside from that, Nick Rice, who's the graduate student that kind of taught me the ins and outs of working in a lab, an enormous mentor for me. And then probably Mr. Guerin, I'd say, for both of us, probably one, who's a chemistry teacher at Wachusett and also largely oversees the whole science seminar program.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Mr. Guerin then. So congratulations to him as well. But he's been doing this for a number of years then, probably through the Wachusett schools,
Right.
is getting, this is pretty amazing stuff. So to be able to get
They've had
students
many
to compete,
amazing
yeah,
people. One of the founders, originators, was Dr. Neil Alt.
Yeah.
And I was there when he was one of the advisors. My own daughter went through science seminar, and Dr. Alt was there. Unfortunately, he passed a couple of years ago. But he left such a legacy that people are so motivated by his work that many doctors and scientists and professors and teachers take part in this.
Wow. Now, where was the international held?
This year it was in Pittsburgh, and last year it was Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. And you've been both, Los Angeles and Pittsburgh. Compare those experiences? Did you know more this time in going to Pittsburgh?
Yeah, I think that one of the advantages of having gone previously, it was that this year I kind of knew the setup of judging and just the overall schedule of the week. Both years were ridiculously fun. I mean, obviously the cities are a bit different, but I think the best part of either fair was kind of getting to know the other delegates from Massachusetts and then around the world. I think that one of the unique things about ISEP, which is the International Fair, is that it's really the only like platform on which all these kids who have relatively similar interests in STEM from all around the world can come together and really kind of bond with that.
So did you guys find out about other projects that at the International Fair where you went, you know what, I'm going to pursue something in that field next time I do a project? I'm assuming you're not stopping with the interest and the success that you've had.
I did. I talked to a sophomore, I believe he was from Montana, and he was also working with biofuel, but he was actually using, I believe it was yeast, and he was trying to make the yeast produce more lipid than algae. And he was doing this actually with some gene editing by injecting plasma into the cells and a plasmid. And I was intrigued by this, and apparently it is a lot easier to do than it seems. And I'd hopefully like to pursue that in the future.
Huh. And now, have you made a connection with this other young man to kind of exchange some of this?
We did exchange emails, and I have not reached out to him just yet, but I certainly would like to.
Now, is there some science trash talk there too, where you go to your mom and go, "Can you believe what this guy's doing with algae? He's years behind me."
Well, I think it was.
I think that's a yes.
Yeah, I think it's a yes.
Yeah. But but there's some. You talked about, Evan, about the fun parts of it too. So so there's a lot of great socializing and going back and forth a little bit, I'm sure.
Yeah, the night we arrive, they have what's called the Pin Exchange, which is an annual thing where you go into this enormous ballroom, and so the delegates from all around the country, or all around the world rather, there are 80 countries I think this year-ish.
81.
Yeah, 81 that were at the fair.
Yeah.
And so everybody has their own pins from their respective science fairs in their nations or states. And so they bring them to trade, and so you go home with all these really interesting kind of souvenirs from around the world, and so it's really tremendous to see what everybody else produces.
Well, that is great. I hope they had some kind of an assembly for you guys or something when you
Yeah.
came back. They did?
Oh no, at
Did
the
they?
school. I thought you
You
meant
said-
that more at the fair.
Oh, at
No,
the fair. I think they should at Wachusett.
No,
They should. They
Get working
should.
on that. Yeah, let's see.
Oh, yeah.
Pep
With our
rally or
budget
something
right
before
now?
they go. Well, okay. All right, that may be tough. Well, what was it? What did they do at the fair?
So it's like a 5-day trip essentially, and so we start out, like I said, with the Pin Exchange, and they allow us really ample time to explore whatever city ISF has chosen that year as the host city. So we definitely had time to walk around Pittsburgh and things like that. There are also awesome guest speakers and keynote speakers. There's a panel at one point that we had where it was just essentially Nobel Prize winners, and you could basically ask students could ask questions, and they would respond with their experience in STEM. So it was an awesome week. But
How heavily recruited are you guys there? I mean, is MIT and WPI and Rensselaer, I don't know, whatever other schools I should be saying, but I mean, are they all there kind of checking you guys? It sounds like athletes,
Right,
you
right.
guys are the best of the best, the brightest of the brightest. They should be there. Are they recruiting you already?
I don't know that it's quite like the athletic recruiting process in that way, but I think that a lot of the delegates there definitely have that on their mind.
They still have to fill out applications, I think is what he's saying.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
you would think that somebody would just want to have you sign a letter of intent to go to their college. What are you guys thinking? What are you thinking about for the future?
In terms of going on to
college,
college,
and what else you want to study, and what else you want to do.
Well, I'd certainly like to pursue biology or environmental science, but I have not at this point narrowed down exactly what field or what school I'd like to go into. I've definitely, and with things like the International Fair, there were colleges looking around. Some colleges more so than others. The University of Arizona, I believe it was actually very heavily involved. I believe one of our friends from Massachusetts who went with us got a full paid scholarship to go there. So there were a lot of opportunities to look into, and that was an eye-opener for me, definitely.
Yeah. Well, you've been headed in this direction since you were 4 years old. What are you thinking about for the future?
So I just graduated Wachusett yesterday, actually, and I'm going to Brown next year to concentrate in molecular biology.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is terrific.
We'll have you on again.
Yeah,
with the new
right.
project that you're going to be doing.
Exactly. All right. Well, how much you brought this up, and let me just say this for our last couple of minutes together. So, how much is, because obviously these are going to be lucrative careers, I suppose, as well. What is the motivation? Is the motivation really, for you, for example, to, I don't want to be too grandiose, but to save us from ourselves, to make sure that Boston doesn't end up underwater at some point?
So, ostensibly, yes. I always wanted to go into that kind of field, that to have an impact, to see that I could help other people all over the world. And with science fair, you see a lot of people, a lot of kids doing that. I mean, there were projects involving cancer. There were projects, one person I saw at the regional fair, he was designing and patenting shelters that were able to stack in such a way that they would be able to aid disaster relief. And these were going to be built and actually shipped out to places like Puerto Rico in need of them.
Amazing what is going on. Evan, what's kind of driving you?
I'd probably say it's that same kind of childish motivation that I had when I was little, just kind of keeping on, like investigating whatever I'm interested in. I mean, I think that in basic science research, there's definitely less grandiose aspirations, maybe. But no, I think that my ultimate goal is probably just to get my PhD and keep researching right now. But just kind of going in with an open mind.
So awesome. As you give us your perspective, it's like looking in a mirror, huh?
Well, but they're more successful than I was. So, but to close up today, sharing my perspective. Again, full disclosure, I'm on the school committee, but that's because of my passion of public school systems and public schools. And I think that sometimes we have this conversation all the time, is our public schools really serving our children well? And I think today is a great example that our public schools can serve our children extremely well. Of course, there is motivation and family support that comes behind with these students. Another thing that I was really impressed with these students is their communication skills. If you've noticed in this show, such complex topics and ideas, but they were able to really confidently talk about it in a manner that everyone at different levels can understand. So what I really suggest you do is look into your public schools, go and look at the town halls, support the budget, and keep going. And Wachusett is doing a great job with things like their science fairs and their science seminars. And I just wanted to give everyone a heads up, a little bit of an example of what our public school systems and schools can do. Thank you so much.